Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, your March Madness edition of Double Coverage. Lots of basketball to talk about, even though none of it has to do directly with the NCAA men's basketball tournament, which begins today. But we got lots of hoops on the schedule anyway. Logan covers Mississippi State for us. I'm the Ole Miss beat writer. The Rebels have a new coach in Kermit Davis Jr. We're going to talk about that. Logan's got lots going on as well. Logan, how are you, man?
Doing good, Parrish. I wish there was something going on. I'm kind of bored around here. There's nothing much to write about right now. But man, there's definitely plenty to write about. It's still got men and women's basketball still going on here at Mississippi State. Both teams made the postseason this year. Baseball getting started with SEC play this weekend, and then starting up Tuesday, Joe Moorhead take the field for the first time with Mississippi State. So plenty going on here in Starkville, and it's going to keep me busy over the next few days, that's for sure.
Who does State open up with in baseball this weekend?
They've got Vandy coming in. So State, kind of up and down right now. Kind of the same thing with Vandy. They've been up and down. They're 12-5. State sitting at 10-7 coming into this weekend. State's ranked 19th. I don't know how, but they're ranked 19th and actually are moving up the rankings somehow. But the pitching's been pretty good. The hitting still got a long ways to go, in my opinion. But they're a young team. We'll see how they do.
Well, I would say that would be a difficult weekend for State, but that's redundant, man. SEC play is here, and every weekend's going to be a challenge. Ole Miss going in with some momentum, 17-1 right now. They'll open up with Tennessee this weekend. They'll open up Friday at 7 o'clock at Swayze Field. SEC play begins. The Rebels are ranked number 8 in the D1 baseball top 25. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Let's talk basketball, Logan. I know that I don't think you were around Mississippi State when Kermit Davis Jr. was a player there, but obviously he has a long history with Mississippi State, his dad having been a coach there and whatnot. But you've been around basketball. You've seen Middle Tennessee a little bit. What do you think of that hire for Ole Miss?
I think it's a good hire and a good fit. I mean, he's done well at Middle Tennessee. Now, granted, it took him a long time. You and I have talked about it in the past couple of weeks, how long it took him to build that program in Middle Tennessee. I think he's walking into a little bit better situation at Ole Miss right now. But I know he's not going to have 10 years. He's not going to have that long of a leash to build that program at Ole Miss. So he needs to turn things around in a hurry there. But, I do think he's very capable. And he's beaten a lot of SEC teams. I know Ben Hallam was asked about it. Kermit Davis Sr. was actually in the room. He actually came down for a visit and during one of Ben Hallam's press conferences a few weeks ago. And he was just Ben Hallam was just talking about how great Kermit Jr.'s team was at Middle Tennessee and how he didn't ever want to schedule them in the non-conference just because they were so good and they had such a good record against SEC teams. So he's going to have to play them next year, that's for sure. And, I'm interested to see, maybe you've already seen it, Parrish, just what's the fan base's reaction? Because I know when Mississippi State hired Marcus Johnson to be their offensive line coach, the former Ole Miss offensive lineman from back in the 2000s is now the offensive line coach at State. And, some of the fan bases, some of the message boards weren't happy about a rebel coming in and infiltrating the coaching staff here at Mississippi State. How's the reaction of Kermit Davis, a former Mississippi State guy, taking over the helm of the Rebels?
Well, Logan, it looks like there's no statute of limitations on pettiness as far as that goes. It doesn't matter that Kermit Davis Jr. was a player at Mississippi State back in the early 80s. Some people have expressed that concern. Look, man, I say loyalty goes wherever the paycheck goes, man. That's who you're loyal to. And look, Logan, from being in this business that you can grow up a fan of a certain school or have a connection or ties to a certain school. When you start dealing in college athletics professionally, you just lose that passion that you might have had many years ago. And it's all about the here and now. It's where you are. It's about the school you're covering or the school you're coaching for or whatnot. Sure, the emotions of the alma mater come into play. We've talked about that with Ole Miss's interest in Michael White, the Florida coach, for this coaching vacancy. I know that there was strong interest from Ole Miss toward Michael White, but it just didn't look like he was ever going to leave Florida at this time. And I think that's how the Rebels found themselves with Kermit White. I know there was great interest, with Kermit Davis. There was great interest in Thad Matta. We've talked about that as well. Thad Matta pulled out of the job, but there was always very strong interest from Ole Miss in Kermit Davis Jr. for obvious reasons. It's not like Ole Miss would be the only school interested in Kermit Davis when you look at the consistency he has established. Now, yes, it took a while for him to get it rolling at this level at Middle Tennessee, but when you go back and you look at his record, it's not like those early teams were terrible. They were winning 17, 18, and 19 games quite a bit. But as we have seen this year with Kermit Davis's team in Conference USA, you've got to win a conference tournament. And that was the sin that the Blue Raiders committed this season. They were upset in the CUSA tournament by Southern Miss, and it didn't matter what they had accomplished to that point, 24 wins, the teams they had beaten. A little bit different this year. There's quadrant 1, quadrant 2, and who you have beaten, where your wins have come from was very important in determining this year's field. So Middle Tennessee had an RPI in the 30s and didn't get in the tournament. But I'll tell you something that was really impressive the other night, Logan, was we so many times see teams that don't qualify for the NCAA tournament come out flat and uninspired in the NIT, clearly looking like they're not interested in being there. That could not have been farther from the truth for Middle Tennessee, in spite of the great disappointment that this group was dealing with. I mean, this is a team that had just won so many games and, had finally cracked the top 25 rankings and had so much going for it, had the RPI and just a very talented group, then knew that it was not going to be in the NCAA tournament. They come out and face Vermont in the first round at home, and they win by like 30 and just lead the game that way, almost the entire time. So I thought it said a lot for Kermit Davis that his team in that situation came out focused and prepared and with an edge and just dominated that first round NIT game at home. Now it gets a little more difficult for the Blue Raiders Sunday night when they take on Louisville, but clearly this is a Louisville team that can be had. They didn't just dominate Northern Kentucky in the first round of the NIT, so we'll see how the Blue Raiders fare in that game. But there is the possibility, Logan, that you and I were discussing a little bit before we got started, that Middle Tennessee, with the new Ole Miss coach, could face Mississippi State with the chance to go to the NIT semifinals on the line.
Yeah, and that's right. And what would have to happen in that scenario is Mississippi State has to go out to Waco and beat top-seeded Baylor on Sunday. They play at 11 a.m. Sunday. Mississippi State made it through the opening round last night against Nebraska, ended up beating the Cornhuskers 66-59. And really the story of the game for me was Lamar Peters. And if you go back to the last game that Mississippi State played in St. Louis last week against Tennessee, Mississippi State had 1 assist as a team. That's it during that ball game. And the fact that it came down to a last-second shot that Mississippi State missed. Xavier Stapleton missed a 3 with about 4 seconds left to go in that ball game, and that cost them the game. But the fact that even came down to that, with just 1 assist was pretty prophetic. And, looking at what happened last night, Lamar Peters had 14 assists on his own. It was just amazing. I think in the first half, 11 assists on 13 made baskets, and he shared the basketball. He had 14 assists and 0 points. And, he's perfectly capable of scoring some points. He had 46 points, I think, in the SEC tournament in their 2 games combined and was just hitting 3 after 3. But, last night he took 3 shots, and they were all from 3-point range, and he missed them all. And I guess he just felt that, they weren't falling, so he just decided to start getting his teammates involved. Abdul Adu, he got him going in the paint, especially early. He's a guy that has struggled over the last few weeks. They got him going. They saw a mismatch down there. State had a size advantage, so they just went to work with Abdul Adu. Adu had 15 points and 9 rebounds. Eric Holman, who's 6'10", comes off the bench. scores 16 points, has 10 rebounds. So State kind of used their size advantage and beat a Nebraska team that came to Starkville back in October. They came in that special exhibition game for hurricane relief back on October 22nd, and Nebraska won that ball game here in Starkville. So kind of a rematch there, and it was a tight ball game last night, kind of back and forth, but State kind of prevailed and came out on top. And we'll have to see what they've got against Baylor on Sunday. But I think that's just a huge step in the right direction for this program. We've talked about State struggles over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, it's their first postseason appearance since 2012. So, just the fact that they're making a little noise here in the NIT is going to be bode well for this team next year, because they've got everybody coming back. There's only one senior on the roster, and that's a walk-on. So all these guys will be back. They've got a highly rated recruiting class coming in as well. So I think that's going to bode well for this team in the future. And the fact they won without Nick Weatherspoon last night too. He's their best defender, second leading scorer. He's possibly going to be back for Sunday. Ben Howland said he was going to be doubtful for Sunday, but he's back running on the Ultra G treadmill, kind of, about 75% of his weight on his body, so we'll have to see, just how much progress he makes between now and Sunday. But, just the fact that he's up and walking and moving around a little bit is encouraging.
Well, it would be great with storylines all around if State and Middle Tennessee match up in the NIT. I like the Kermit Davis hire, Logan. You mentioned the fan base earlier. I think there's some split. I don't know what the percentages are, but I think when you look at people who observe basketball and who have paid close attention to Kermit Davis's Middle Tennessee State career, and when you look at some of the commentary coming from some national analysts and whatnot, those are the folks who really look at this as a home run hire for Ole Miss. I think there's also a segment who would like to have seen a big splashy hire, a Thad Matta hire. There was a segment who wanted Penny Hardaway from Memphis to be the coach of this team. I never thought that was going to happen because of just the glaring lack of college coaching experience. Yes, Penny Hardaway with his Memphis connections and NBA connections would have been able to get some players maybe that Ole Miss might not have gotten before, but I never thought they would go that direction because of the lack of coaching experience. Hey, folks, we're going to shift gears a little bit before we get on to some other topics. I'd like to remind you about a couple of other podcasts to be on the lookout for. Be sure to check out The Memo, our news podcast coming to you every Thursday, diving deep into Northeast Mississippi with Chris Kiefer and Emma Crawford-Kent. And be sure to check out the prep rally for all your high school sports needs. That comes to you every Wednesday with Brad Locke and Dalton Middleton. And Logan and I are here with you every week with double coverage as well. More basketball, Logan. Tell us about the MSU women and what's going on with their NCAA tournament appearance.
Well, they earned their first ever number one seed in the NCAA tournament. Going to be in the Kansas City region, and I think Mississippi State got a very fortunate draw. A lot of there's only just a handful of teams that are just kind of the blue bloods of college basketball, and on the women's side, and Mississippi State's going to be able to avoid a lot of those teams until they reach maybe the Final Four. If they play Baylor, they would meet in the Final Four. If they play South Carolina, the team that's kind of been the thorn in Mississippi State's side over the last few years, they would have to meet in the championship game. Same with UConn. If they get that rematch of that Final Four a year ago, that would be in the national championship game this year. So, and actually South Carolina and UConn are both in that Albany region. So those two teams are going to have to face each other to get to that Final Four appearance. So that'll be interesting to see. But, Mississippi State right now opens up with Nicholls State here on Saturday, 5 o'clock in Humphrey Coliseum. Mississippi State will actually host the first 2 rounds of that tournament on Saturday, and then again on Monday. The other 2 teams coming in, Syracuse and Oklahoma State. Mississippi State's already beaten both of those teams earlier this season, and Vic Schaefer kind of joked that it was kind of their the committees was trying to be a little humorous, play a little joke on Mississippi State by sending them 2 teams that they had already beaten. But I tell you what, I was at that Oklahoma State game, and that team gave Mississippi State fits. Mississippi State won that game by 3 points, and it was a nail biter throughout. So that's actually a matchup that Mississippi. There's not going to be a cakewalk just to get out of the the Starkville region and make it to Kansas City. So, Mississippi State's going to have their hands full, whether they play Syracuse or Oklahoma State in that second round. They should get past Nichols. That Nichols comes in as a 16 seed, shouldn't have too much trouble there. But if they, that second round game could be a doozy. And if they do make it past that, they'll move on to Kansas City, and we'll have to see who gets there. Texas is actually the number 2 seed in Mississippi State's region, so we'll have to see if that matchup holds true. Texas has usually got a pretty good basketball team on the women's side too, but it's going to be an exciting atmosphere. They've already sold out the Starkville region, so it's going to be 10,000 plus in the hump again, and should be a raucous atmosphere.
Well, I tell you what, Logan, if you make it to Kansas City, if Mississippi State makes it out there, it is a fabulous arena with a really nice downtown district right around it. Really good experience there. It was 5 years ago this week that Ole Miss played there with Marshall Henderson, Jarvis Summers, Murphy Holloway, and that bunch. And as a 12 seed, Ole Miss upset number 5 seed Wisconsin and came very close, Logan, to a Sweet 16 appearance. That's 5 years ago now. That was also a time that we kind of got iced in there and didn't know exactly how we were going to make it from the hotel to the arena, but we got there. Very nice arena there in Kansas City. Shifting gears a little bit, spring football is off this week for Ole Miss. Logan, I know you mentioned that Mississippi State will be getting started there soon with new coach Joe Moorhead. Let's talk baseball a little bit. The Rebels come in to the series with Tennessee, having won 9 straight games. They are 17-1. If they win Friday in the series opener, they will match the second best start in school history. Look, we've seen Ole Miss win games at this part of the season before. It's much better to win them to not win them. They've got a lot of momentum going into SEC play, but this is where the rubber meets the road, and this is where they're going to have to continue to play at a high level. I really like what I'm seeing in this team right now. We've talked about the improvement on offense, and a team that was batting just .253 at the end of last season right now is hitting over .301. Those newcomers who never recovered last year after that difficult first trip away from Swayze Field in Houston. We talked about that recently. They just did not respond to the very good pitching they saw there, and it really never got better. Everyone seems to be hitting at a higher level right now. Now, this group before the season started, we would ask, how are you going to be better on offense? And the answer was, well, we all have a year under our belts, which I thought was a pretty generic answer. And I don't think that experience by itself is enough, but experience plus the work and the determination that this group has put in so far has helped it. Now, the level of play is going to increase with the conference season. That always happens. But right now, the Rebels hitting above 300 as a team. Guys like Chase Cockrell, Thomas Stillard, Gray Kessinger, who hit just 175 last year, really with a strong early showing on offense. We always believed, Logan, that pitching was going to be such a big part of any success that Ole Miss would have, and it has turned out to be that way too. They've had 3 very successful starters on the weekend in the non-conference series with Ryan Rollison, the left-hander, going in the first game. He'll start Friday night against Tennessee. Brady Feigl, junior right-hander, a 4th-year junior. Guy's been around a while. Earlier this week was named the National Pitcher of the Month for the month of February by the National Collegiate Baseball Writers Association. He's the Game 2 starter. And then James MacArthur has been solid in Game 3. Pitching has been very good. The Rebels lead the nation in strikeout to walk ratio for pitchers. And one thing they've been able to do differently this season so far has been to be able to make big pitches with men on base, to be able to snuff out rallies, to keep guys on base, strand those runners, keep them from getting home. And that's been huge in the start that they've had this season. And no bigger example is there than on Tuesday night against Georgia State in Atlanta. A very good Georgia State team. The Rebels were able to win twice. But the first game was very much a challenge. The Rebels were able to preserve a 5-3 win when closer Dallas Woolfolk was facing a bases-loaded, one-out situation and was able to induce a double play ball and end the game. that saved that game. Ole Miss won 5-3. They come back the next day and win 16-2. And you see that a lot if you have those two midweek games like that. Usually, those non-conference teams might be deep enough to throw a good arm in the first game, but not always in the second. So Ole Miss 17-1 going into the Tennessee series. Logan, the Bulldogs coming off that loss to Southeastern Louisiana. What do you expect from them against Vanderbilt?
I really don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I haven't seen this team just a whole lot this year because they've played so many games away from home. And, I missed a few games last week while I was in St. Louis, but, I watched them on my iPad up in St. Louis a little bit. And, their offense is just so wishy-washy as far as it's not very consistent. They're hitting 268 right now. A lot of it has to do with so many freshmen in the lineup, and those freshmen have kind of been the biggest run producers for the team. I mean, Tanner Allen and Rowdy Jordan are the two RBI leaders on this ball club right now. And, those freshmen, six out of their 10 home runs have been hit by the freshmen. And, what you're getting in Jake Mangum. He's hitting 351 right now. He's got a 422 on base percentage. So he's getting on base, and, they're driving him in occasionally. But right now, some of those guys they expected to be big bats in the lineup, or they needed to step up into big bat roles. An Elijah McNamee, a Hunter Van Sal, Tanner Poole. They were hoping those guys, some upperclassmen, were going to be able to step into some of those roles and fill that big gap that they lost in Brent Rooker a year ago. And so far, that hadn't happened. It's been the freshmen that have kind of taken on that role. And catcher, they're just not getting a whole lot offensively from either one of those guys. Dustin Skelton hitting a $194, Marshall Gilbert a $167. Both those guys below the Mendoza line, so they need more production offensively out of those two guys. But pitching, they're doing pretty well on the pitching side, especially on the weekend. Now they've had some struggles in the midweek, and that was evidenced last night by Southeastern Louisiana. They jumped all over them 5-1 down in Biloxi last night, and then turned around and ended up losing 11-5. I mean, that's just has a direct result, for the pitching. They couldn't get anything done offensively, and they couldn't stop anybody on the mound either. So, the midweek is still a big question mark. But they've pitched it well on the weekends. Connor Pilkington leading that Friday night role on the mound, and then you turn around with Ethan Small, who's coming back with a bounce back year this year, coming off of Tommy John surgery. He's pitched fairly well on Saturdays, and then they've got a fifth-year senior in Jacob Billingsley, a right-hander, going on Sundays, and he's been up, okay on that Sunday roll. But really, they're getting their most production out of Connor Pilkington, and that's kind of what you expect. He's projected to be a first or second round draft pick, a big 6'4" lefty, and that's where you're going to have to make your hay. You've got to make it on the mound right now. He's got a 1.17 ERA, but he's only got a 1-1 record on the year just because he hadn't had a whole lot of run support in those starts that he's made. He's got 35 strikeouts and only one walk on the entire year. That's pretty good numbers right there. And, but like I said, you've got to have run support, and that's something he has had lacking of. So we'll have to see how they do against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's hitting 304 right now. It's 17 home runs. So they got a pretty good ball club coming in here. They've kind of been up and down too, but this will just be Vanderbilt's third away game of the season. So Mississippi State definitely has plenty of experience on the road, and we'll have to see how Vanderbilt handles this new Dudy Noble Field atmosphere, who will be, I guess, its first SEC game. We'll just have to see how the crowd does there, with about 7,000 people capacity for this year.
Hey, Logan, Southeastern Louisiana, I know you know this, is a solid baseball program, and that's something about the teams, in the South, in the Southeast that we see so often that Ole Miss and MSU play. You don't have to go far to find good, solid baseball. Now, you're expected to win these non-conference games, and if you lose them, it's going to be a drag on your RPI and on your resume. But when you look at programs like, Southeastern, which has been a consistent NCAA tournament program, and then Southern Miss, Memphis, any given year, Samford, UAB, these are going to be very strong programs that the teams we cover are facing in the midweek. Every midweek game is not a throwaway game. Sometimes it's very challenging, especially when that team knows it can build its resume by beating an SEC team. So there's lots of good baseball in the area. So we'll see what the Bulldogs and Rebels are able to do with the first weekend of SEC play. Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Be sure to check out The Memo, our news podcast, every Wednesday with Chris Kiefer and Emma Crawford Kent. I believe that's on Thursday. Misspoke there. Every Thursday with The Memo. Every Wednesday with Prep Rally for all your high school sports needs with Dalton Middleton and Brad Locke. And be sure to come back next Thursday or Friday, depending on schedules and how things play out, for another round of Double Coverage.